to get a mortgage in Panama for a foreigner, 2022. So what we'll cover in this video is who can and cannot get a mortgage in Panama, interest rates and down payment, major banks issuing mortgages, underwriting mortgages, required documentation, and application process and timelines, what to expect. So let's get right to it. So who can and cannot get a mortgage in Panama? Who can? Residents of Panama can prove consistent income over the past 2 years. Employed or self-employed, doesn't matter. Foreign income is accepted. And those who have good credit history and who can demonstrate it through Equifax or TransUnion or other credit bureaus. Now, who cannot get a mortgage in Panama are pensioners or people on fixed income. And this is because mortgages and banks in Panama are given to those prior to pension age. So the mortgages are given up to 65 or 70 years old. If you are over that, then the amortization term will be 0 and thus no mortgage. And also the bank wants to see an employment or self-employment income. Although pensioners do get a fixed income, it is not considered an acceptable form of income for the banks. Residents of Panama on Pensionado visa are not accepted for the above stated reasons, and non-residents of Panama. So if you want to buy a property in Panama and get a mortgage for it, and you're not a resident of Panama, the banks will not consider you because you are high risk to them. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but those in the can't category will have a really hard time getting a mortgage. Clients of private banks serving high net worth individuals are the exception to the rule, of course, as they make their own rules, and their banks help them go away with murder pretty much. Interest and down payment. So interest rates in Panama are higher than in the US and Canada. Panamanians pay about 5 or 6% mortgage rates, when residents with income outside of Panama will pay a 1% premium on top of that. So the effective rate will hover around 7%, 7.5%, up to upwards 8%. Down payment varies from 20 to 50% depending on the bank, leaning towards the higher end. The more down payment you provide, the more willing the bank will be to take you as a client and take care of the risk associated with underwriting a mortgage. Amortization term of the mortgage is usually 20 years, but is limited by the pension age of the applicant. In example, if the applicant reaches the pension age in 10 years, then the mortgage will be for 10 years only. Here is an example of the approval letter from Banco General, which states the amount of the mortgage, which states the percentage, the amortization period, the monthly payments, and the down payment amount. We'll discuss our major banks in Panama. There are many major banks in Panama, but only some of them work with individuals versus companies, and not all of them underwrite mortgages. Risk levels for those banks differ greatly, so it makes sense to apply to several. Do not be surprised that some of them will drag on forever or decline you. There will be one bank that will approve you eventually. So one of the major ones is Banco General. Their rates and conditions are not the most favorable. They usually require 50% down, but it is the biggest bank of Panama. The next one is Banismo, formerly known as HSBC. HSBC sold their division to a Colombian bank, Banismo, so they bought it. They operate in Panama. It's number 2. Scotiabank, nothing to do with the Canadian Bank of Nova Scotia, aka Scotiabank. It is a separate company altogether. Also, they borrow the logo cues from its Canadian counterpart. Their conditions are better. They normally require only 20 or 30% down and approve you for higher mortgages, but they drag on their feet in terms of approval, so it takes forever. BAC is another popular bank. Banesco, don't confuse it with Banismo. Multibank, Banco Mercantil, and Metro Bank are the ones that you can apply to. Required documents. Okay, so here's the extensive list of the required documents you'll need. The list of documents is extensive, and the bank will ask for more documents on top of those, for updated documents, etc. So be prepared for it. So for example, some of the document that you will provide could be in the list, but they don't like the format of it, so they can ask you to change the format, and then a couple of months go by for their decision, and the documents expire, so they'll ask you to reissue the documents or give them the most recent ones. That is the usual modus operandi. So, in the order: IDs, passports, settler, permanent residency card, pretty self-explanatory. Financials. So they require 2 years of tax returns, 6 months of pay stubs, and employment letter mentioning current standing. Oh, bank account statements as well. In addition to the pay stubs, employment letter mentioning current standing with the company, your job title, and salary. Equifax, not just the score, but the detailed all the pages with each of the credit company that pinged your credit report. It should be listed there, and all your obligations as well. And all the documents must be 90 days fresh. Recommendations. With the exception of the pay stub. Pay stubs must be current. All the other documents can be, depending on the bank, 30 to 90 days fresh. Recommendation letters. Recommendation letter from your lawyer. Your immigration lawyer in Panama can write you that. Letter of good standing from your current bank. So approach your branch, and they'll do it happily for you. Some of them will not, and others you can just get directly from downloading from the online banking. But such letters usually state that you're a client in good standing for so many years, have so much money in the account, etc. If such letters are not possible, then there is an option for some of the banks to get similar letters, not exact, but similar, from the online banking, and they usually are accepted, depending on the Panamanian bank. Sometimes they're picky, sometimes they're not. Also depends on the person and the underwriter that you deal with. And the application form, last but not least, the bank provides the application form. Most of them are in Spanish, so you can use your Google Translate or brush up your Spanish. The application forms are not readily available online. Some banks do provide it. Some will only give it to you once you're in the branch, and others once you engage their mortgage department, lending department. Once you connect with the person, they email it to you or WhatsApp it to you. Here is an example of the recommendation letter from the lawyer. So the wording could be similar, the same. If you want to copy it, feel free to do so. Give it to your lawyer, or your lawyer can draft your own. Application process and timelines. Okay, so you can reach out and submit to banks individually, or use a mortgage broker. If you apply yourself, it's best to book an appointment with the branch and start the process in person. Otherwise, they'll ignore you. This will give you the contact of the case manager who will handle your case and who you can harass afterwards. You can get a mortgage application forms and requirements by contacting the bank mortgage department. Some of them will give you their WhatsApp number to chat. Some of the application you can find online, rarely so though. They're not publicizing it. If you do it yourself, it may take forever. From the moment you submit all the documents and application forms, it may take for them 3 to 6 months for approval or a decline, and they're very bad at communicating back to you, so you'll need to harass them constantly to keep your case open. And if you use a mortgage broker, the process is much quicker because they know what they're doing. It usually takes 1 or 2 months from the moment you submit all the documents. But using the mortgage broker, beware, because banks don't pay commission to mortgage brokers. The client, you, the applicant will have to cover that. And that's in tune of $800 to $1,000 application fee and 2-3% of the success fee upon pre-approval of the mortgage. So you may not use the mortgage necessarily, but the moment you get pre-approved for the amount, you get the letter from the bank, you have to pay it. One of the mortgage agencies in Panama is called Best Mortgages Panama. That's all.